Hi, I'm Josh from Simple Thought Productions, and today I wanted to go over the configuration and setup that I have with the Skaarhoj Airfly Pro V2 control surface with my Tricaster TC1. They just recently released a massive update that gave more than just macro control, but true feedback with the Tricaster is what I think really made this surface viable for use. For the last few years, I've been looking for a small surface that really allows me to get good feedback on what's going on without taking up a huge amount. I do a fly pack and a lot of portable setups, so having a giant two-stripe, for example, does not really work out, let alone cost, but also size and weight and transporting that thing around. This is smaller than the original TC1 small panel, yet you can control so much more and get specific feedback on what you're up to. So as an example of that is simply the OLEDs. By default, as you assign it to input 1, if you change the title of input 1, that will say, it'll then follow. So you can do, in my case, I've named my inputs left, center, right, goal, pitch, etc. And then as you assign the buttons to these surfaces, they'll follow along. So if I update the third input from right to something else, this surface, this OLED will update to show. The second part of those OLEDs is the shift layers. So with other control surfaces, I could do effectively shift and have those buttons act on something different. But without the programmable OLED, I have to either memorize what that shift is doing, or I have to, split the button and put one title up top and another title on the bottom and explain to people, okay, if you're not holding shift, it'll be the top, but if you hold shift, it'll be the bottom. And then if you want to do additional layers from there, it just becomes untenable without memorization, which means it's much harder to train someone on a complicated show because they won't be able to know what the buttons are going to do until I memorize them. So this setup means I don't have to do memorization, nor do I have to teach someone memorization. So the next thing that I want to bring up is going to be the output menu, where on sporting events, I have to do quite a bit of output configuration with like coach copies and other various bits and pieces. So if we come over to our interface where we can see I have my output configuration, if I come into output on the surface, I can go through outputs 1 through 4, because that's what I have on the Tricaster. And this would be one of the first other areas in terms of on the core from Skaarhoj. They primarily did the newest core around the TC2. So by default, it would show me 8 outputs. Even though I don't have 8, if I try to do anything on 5 through 8, nothing happens. It's just frustrating. But good news is that if you go into the configuration, you can do the limitations on the cycling. So in this particular case, I gave it a limit of 3 because 0 is used. So effectively, I now only have to deal with outputs 1 through 4. And as I do that, I can now see in this particular row here, program is selected, but if I select program clean, I can see on the interface now that I've selected preview program clean for mix 2, and as I change to mix 3, these buttons also, the OLEDs update to tell me I'm impacting mix 3, and if I wanted to assign mix 3 to DDR2 for maybe being a referee replay station where all I output is my replay channel, that is a really easy way to do it, and it allows me, without even actually bringing up the output configuration like you see it in the interface, I don't have to have that, because as I cycle through these, I can see what they're on. So if I need to change it, I can change it. And that's really nice to not have to open up on the UI side of the Tricaster to see that bit of information. So going from there, the next feature on this really is around the media players, so the DDRs. So you need to be able to play, start, pause, etc., and get feedback on what's been set up. So I can cycle through the media player, and again, this is in a similar boat where it technically gives me access to DDRs I don't have, being DDRs 3 and 4. They don't exist on a TC1. And again, Skaarhoj agrees that they want to detect the appropriate TriCaster and do the right thing. In the meantime, I can ignore it, but as I'm inside of a DDR, it'll update to show me it's on DDR1 in the OLED. And then if I'm currently playing or not, so if I go over to 2, I can hit play, and in this particular case, the light will light up a brighter green, and if I hit stop, it'll dim down, and then the red light will go up to give me that feedback. And then, you know, your normal control, all of this is customizable, so if you want to put these in a different position or different colors, you can do that. And finally, you know, for the buttons I use a lot. And then finally, loop, autoplay, and single mode, which are huge in terms of knowing, okay, do I have loop on for DDR2 or not, or single mode versus list. So I can get that feedback. So if those get changed in the interface, they will update here as well. The communication is both ways, which is fantastic. And then this kind of gets into a little bit, I don't know if I'd really call it advanced programming side, but it is more than what's in by default. I have it set up to where I don't want to have to, I want to control a DDR where I have to hit the media because I'm about to bring it live. In my particular case, what I've done, which is pretty straightforward, is I've set up the surface to basically say, if I bring DDR1 or 2 into program or preview, so in other words, when I press this button, not only is it going to select the DDR1 on preview, it's also going to delegate that media control just as if I'd pressed this button and selected the appropriate DDR. So if I press DDR1, it'll go to media 1 and show DDR1 in those so I can see what's there. And if I go to DDR2, it also updates to show media 2 in DDR2. And then subsequently, I've programmed all the alternative buttons to go off of that. So if I then move to pitch, it'll exit out of the DDR control because I'm no longer showing it. I can still go back via button presses if I want, but this makes it really trivial to where if I need to work on a DDR, it comes up, and if I leave the DDR, it goes away. And all of these buttons effectively are programmable and signable. They have what they call the overall layers, where you can have 9 of those, which is really what these are controlling, and then you have shift layers, which can impact any of those. So it kind of gets exponential in terms of how much you can have, but because you can program titles to feedback, you can truly utilize all those different layers and have feedback to know what are you actually controlling at any given moment, which I think is fantastic. And then the last part, I use the color coding is around, these are simply just macros. So in this particular case, I use blue to denote my graphics. I have an external third-party graphics system from NewBlue, where if I press, it'll bring up my intro title, and then if I press it again, it runs again. So the macros don't have any feedback like the other controls, but it allows you to simply trigger any of your macros and have those by name. And if you do different ones, you can see what's there and again, update. So as you go through to show the different ones, it's really straightforward to utilize, which is great. The other stuff, again, just going back to the core feature that they have where you can add cores. In this particular case, I have a core installed for the TriCaster and one for the Hilo. So if I go into the Hilo stuff when we do these, once I program it, I can control start and stops and update all these bits and pieces. But there's also cores for PTZ cameras, whether that's the NewTek, Bird Dog, Panasonic, etc. And then what these controls were originally meant for was selecting a given camera, as well as zoom and positioning, and that works, great. In my particular case, I don't use PTZs very often, so I'm repurposing these to be able to select the transition type of whatever ME I've delegated to, along with the transition time to get me back. But again, all of these things are programmable. So there are a few little weird gotchas in terms of just, certain things not selecting the way that I'd like, in terms of like for the output, I have to use a macro to select the audio. They only have programmed selection of the video sources, not being able to select aux 1, 2, 3, etc. But that's something that they're looking at getting added in. So little pieces here and there, but again, I have not seen anything quite as promising in terms of a control surface, and it's not limited to the TriCaster either. They have cores for ATEM, for vMix, and it is really cool that you can install multiple cores, so you could have multiple layers, one controlling a vMix machine, one controlling an ATEM, and one controlling a TriCaster. There are limitations. I believe this is effectively Arduino inside in terms of how many cores you can run. It really just depends on how much feature and feedback those things have. But I've been able to run my two Helos and TriCaster without any issue so far. But it's, having the ability to control multiple devices from one surface and configure those is a very powerful feature. And I'm definitely looking forward to the next updates that come with this. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll continue to work and try to refine this and potentially share the configurations that I do, as I've taken the base TriCaster template and started to modify it to provide that additional feature set around the DDRs and automatic control. With that being said, have a great day, and if you got any questions, please feel free to comment below.